Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be doing a kind of artist overview. I've already done an artist overview for YUICHI YOKOYAMA with a number of books before, but Editions Metier, who one of my favorite art comic publishers, just released these two, Combats and Astronauts, are new works that they've released of Yuichi Yokoyama's. And while I was ordering those, I got a couple other of his books that they have that I don't have. So I'm not gonna go into each book like super deep. I just want to give an overview of the works that I haven't had before and talk about them, and just kind of like people can get between the couple of videos a real complete view, I think, of his works. So the first one here is called, these are all, by the way, Editions Metier is a French company, so these are all French translations. I wasn't too worried about that because all the other Yuichi Yokoyama stuff I have is pretty much just dialogue lists. It's just sound effects that are getting translated, and I don't really care about that so much. Unfortunately, some of these actually do have dialogue in them, and so I wasn't able to fully read them, but he's such a great visualist that it didn't matter. This one is Travaux Publics. Again, apologize for the pronunciation. I'm definitely not the right guy to be pronouncing French, but I think it's just public travels. So as you'll get with the Yuichi Yokoyama, things unfold very slowly, like a second or two at a time, but the images are extremely dynamic and action-packed. You can see this, there's almost like this book has just like a lot of terraforming going on in it, like people building a world, and you can see just some of the beautiful visuals here. There's a lot of poetics of form going on, just in terms of like layout and composition and how shapes repeat throughout. A lot of pure abstraction underneath the compositions here, but then everything, even if it looks totally chaotic at first, you can really adapt pretty quickly to Yuichi Yokoyama's visual language and get a sense of the forms. And so even though the way he combines the sound effects over top of everything makes these really cluttered, and sometimes he chooses odd angles and whatnot, they make for fascinating compositions, and you can actually follow the stories really carefully if you just slow down a little bit and process. So these are just purely like visual treats to me, and you can see some of these pages here. Like this page, I think, is just absolutely gorgeous, and insane amount of work being done in some of these panels as well. This looks like it could probably be printed poster size, and you would be seeing like there's people all up in this pool. So really just compelling page layouts, some compelling visuals, or even if I didn't know what was going on, I'd just be excited by the way it looks. And then when I take the time to go through each one, yeah, it's super hyper. To me, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It's just a distillation of what manga is. It's decompressed in the term that it goes very slow in terms of like 2 seconds at a time or whatever, but then also like super hyper at the same time. Lots of action lines and sound effects and movement and crazy camera angles and stuff. And then you add on this amazing cartooning and really particular style that he has, and you have one of the most unique, interesting voices going in comics in a long time. Also throughout the books, just a real wide variety of use of like screen tones that's very beautiful. In this one, there are also a lot of kind of pictures here. There's some writing that is in French, so I don't understand exactly what these photos are supposed to be, but I'm assuming these are photos that Yuichi Yokoyama took on travels or something, to have as reference material. So an interesting thing. I wish I could get these all in English, but it's something like this where there's not much dialogue, I'm not missing out on much. It's just pure visual delight. Nouveau Corps, the new body, I believe is what that would translate to. Really cool cover here. I love what Edition Metier does, where they have this kind of standard use of the yellow line, so they have a common design feature across all of their products that are in this like formalist play category that they have in their web shop. And then just some really beautiful design choices and color choices. Like seeing Yuichi Yokoyama's work colored like this is also wild. I kind of wish I could see him work like this, because his stuff, like with some of the optical effects you could get with the tones and stuff with the patterns, would just be totally wild. But anyways, he's not doing that. This book was the one that I most definitely could not really understand what was going on, because it's very dialogue heavy. What I take away from it is that this opening sequence looks like the beginning of the Suicide Squad, where you just have all these characters, and some of them I recognize from his other books that I have either translated or ones that are silent. So I think what he's doing here is he's building his cast of characters, like in the Suicide Squad, where they get the dossier and they just say, this guy with the strange head, he's encore un masque, and like they're just going through these characters, I think. So he's introducing you to a world. Then there's a whole sequence where they just go character by character, and they each get a 2-page spread like this, and you see them get their costume put on. So this guy that I'm familiar with is kind of like the Jack-in-the-Box looking guy. That's a character I recognize. You see him get the mask put on, you see it get painted, you see it get the bird nose, the feathers put on, and that goes on for a lot of the characters. Then you get these sequences here, these double page spreads, where they're coating these characters in different kind of materials. So they're spraying them with some kind of like adhesive, and they're jumping in these ball pits or money pits, pits of grass, things like that. And really, that's like what this whole book is it just looks like the really slow assembly of a superhero team. Then you have all these characters here doing these wild like training bits, so they're running in a wheel and jumping, and it looks like X-Men training in the danger room. And then at the end there's some like, you know, folded up cutout type of stuff. What all this, and then you can see someone doing that, and then the actual flat characters like talking. So some very, very fun formal ideas in here. Some just really beautiful visuals where he's playing with the textures and the tones, handwritten tones versus preset tones and things like that. But I just don't know what it all adds up to. And I know these characters play out in some other volumes. So this is one that I would really like a translation of at some point. So like I could get the complete story of these characters and know what's going on. This one, a big old thick book here called Jardin. I believe this is Garden, but I could be wrong on that. Some interesting things in here where you have Yuichi Yokoyama playing with spotting of black, which is different for his work. Usually it's pretty clean lined and then just the tones. So an interesting thing to see. This looks like a lot of the characters. This one also has language in it, so I don't know totally what's going on. But it has a lot of characters from the previous book, so I think this is part of that larger story, and that carries on throughout the majority of this book, where I couldn't really read it, I just had to look at it. But visually, you can track what's going on, like you don't know what the characters are talking about. But this whole set of characters that he drew in that other book, they're all in here, and they each are in their costume. There's the bird cone-headed guy, there's the leaf guy. Like, so his work at first can, like at first glance on some pages, seem pretty simple and cartoony, but and sparse. You know, there's a lot of white on the pages, but the amount of information actually rendered on any given panel and any given page can be pretty overwhelming. Like when you look at this one, this is still all each individual character represented kind of like in a Gumby form for the most part. So he's really tracking each individual. I was just saying this earlier today. I recorded the Trad Moore video, and I think Yuichi Yokoyama is the same as Trad Moore in that he is such an impeccable storyteller, and he's such an impeccable choreographer of action and like follower of items through a scene. His camera play is really good, but because his cameras are often put in strange places, because his style is just naturally so distorted, because he does so much with the sound effects, because he does so many things like this panel here where he's got like the characters being seen through bubbles. And because there's just such a wide cast of such strangely designed characters, you can almost get confused and say, well, these books make no sense. I don't know what's going on. This is hard to process. It's giving me a headache. But if you give yourself just a couple minutes to adapt and really slow down and soak in what Yuichi Yokoyama is doing, he's an impeccable choreographer and storyteller, and it's really fascinating. I'm really into this like brand of artists where they're kind of what's going on underneath is so solid that they can get really strange on top and get away from it. There's a really fascinating scene here where Yuichi Yokoyama plays with books within books, which is something I've seen in some of his other art where he'll have like a character flipping through a book, and then you have other comic pages embedded within comic pages or illustrated book pages. You see here this page of like these really strange wingdings. All these books stacked sideways, these books become design elements throughout these really long books. He really just has fun with drawing books inside of books, even to the extent of kind of predicting that this would have come out quite a bit before. But right here, he's got this gigantic book that's all bound, and now there actually is a book like this. Someone has bound. Maybe I'll try and put the link for that project in the bottom. There's an artist that I've seen on Instagram that took all of the manga One Piece and bound it all in one piece. So it's a book that's about that long, probably. It's funny to see that in here as like a ridiculous book, and now there's something like that that exists. Seeing here, again, I can't read it, but they're putting down like all these photographs, so it's kind of like Google Maps, but taken physically analog with physical photographs, and they're laying it all out on the floor here. This is another one of those where you can see like the amount of insane detail that Yuichi Yokoyama is actually putting into the artwork, even though it's all really clean line and solid flat blacks and stuff. Another example of that is here where there's just this wave of papers coming in, and it's rendered actually like one paper at a time. Some pretty intense stuff going on. Then at the end of that, it has what's called a Premiere Development Suite de la page 25. So I think what these are like basically scenes that got cut out. Like this would have followed page in between page 25 and then wherever it kicks off next. And there's a number of these in here. Like this one looks like where they're dealing with the books and all the papers get blown out to make this tidal wave probably. So there's a number of these in here, which is interesting. Again, without being able to like read it and know exactly how it all fits into the story, it's hard to tell. But you can see some of the visuals of like these trees that were earlier in the book, and again, some of just the beautiful compositions that Yokoyama Yuichi has in the books, and then things like this that are almost totally abstract, completely wild images. It's just like, if you like comics and you like this like visual design and stuff, I don't know how you couldn't like Yuichi Yokoyama's books. One of the two new ones is Astronaut. Astronauts is really cool because it's printed on a like metallic paper, I think. I don't think it's a metallic ink. I think it's a metallic paper with an ink printed on top of it, which definitely is going to go into my repertoire of production tricks that I want to figure out how to use. This one is pretty dialogue heavy. It looks like it's set in that superhero world or whatever it is that are in a couple of the other books. So I'm pretty, kept out of this one. I'm kind of wishing I would have done a little bit more research on which ones I could actually read or not. But I don't know if these are able to be translated either. So to just have them as visual objects that I can enjoy, especially this one where it's all shiny like that. And the typical edition métier, they got to get the yellow on top because they probably couldn't print with yellow ink. I'm not sure. So really a cool like designed little object. I can't make much of it in terms of a story. And then the other new one that come out is Combats, and this one I can really recommend. Like if you need one Yuichi Yokoyama book to get Plaza from Living the Line from Sean, because that's a nice big book and it's all wordless and it's all one story. Or Combats would be a pretty good one as well. There's more short stories in this, but they're all built around fight scenes. There is some dialogue in some of them, but you get the sense that the people are just kind of like yelling at each other. So this would be a pretty good entry as well, just in terms of like Plaza is one big long story of a parade. This one's probably a little bit more approachable in the sense that it's a bunch of fight scenes, and they're pretty entertaining fight scenes as well. So here you get like these guys just bust into this room, and it's very gonzo like that. You just come in and the action starts, and that's why, like, if there is any dialogue in this one, I didn't feel left out. And then I'm just gonna go through the first one to show like what a great storyteller and choreographer Yuichi Yokoyama is, and then also just kind of how funny the combat in these books can be in these stories. So these characters start throwing the dishes, and you can see everyone avoiding the dishes. He has these characters with the strange heads and helmets still, so that becomes a part of it. You get a guy here opens the... So this is a really great sequence for the choreography. You see here this guy coming at this character with the strange head. He's got the sword. This guy looks to the side, opens the refrigerator door, catches the sword, and then pushes it and snaps the sword. Then pulls out the fruit drawer, chucks a watermelon. Somebody chops the watermelon in half, and then you follow all of the pieces of fruit following and spilling everyone over. So that's where you can see, like, at a glance, this is a very bizarre set of shapes and images to look at, just because of the stylization and the camera angles that are chosen, the crops. The character will be really far in the back, the objects will be really far up. A lot of strange choices like that, but never at the expense of clear storytelling if the reader like takes some time to process the more stranger stylistic things. Here now the character grabs a tree, pulls it out of the pot. The pot gets thrown and knocks one person out, throws them out of the building. Then the tree gets swung around, and the rest of the sod gets thrown off at another person. Then this character uses the tree to whack the person with the fish tank for a head. This then avoids this character who has run, and you can see them running down the stairs here in the back. Has swung a chair, like avoids the chair. You get a close-up here of them, this character holding the sword into the ground, and another character coming to swing something over top. So just all of this like really great, almost Jackie Chan-like action. Here they have this gigantic sword that takes two people to hold, and they run it through and like chop the top off of a table. You can see like this is like four guys here running out with the sword and holding it. So yeah, this kind of absurd like Jackie Chan humorous action going on top of things with just this bizarre style and impeccable storytelling. It's a real pleasure to witness. While I was reading this, I was thinking, man, it's actually it's such strange experimental work. It's like seeing an alien transmission. It feels that absurd. But then when you really get into it, it's like, no, this is just a really great action comic. And I would love to see Yuichi Yokoyama do a superhero comic. I was talking with Chad Bill Yu, like we keep kind of bouncing back and forth if we could do like a line of books for Marvel, like who would do what. And I was like, man, I would love to see Yuichi Yokoyama do Quicksilver. Like a whole book that's just 2 seconds for a 200-page book, and he's just showing what Quicksilver does in 2 seconds or something. Like this guy would be so good for superhero books, especially if we colored it. Like, I don't know. Here's another one. There's a bunch of characters that go up over top of a city on these platforms, and they start raining bullets down, and you get all these people running. So in this one, just going and showing some of the fun visuals that Yuichi Yokoyama comes up with. This is another instance where he has fun drawing books inside of books. So here you get this book that's been sliced in half, and that creates this really beautiful graphic visual. You have one that has like floor plans in it. Another book kind of getting cut in half in a funny way up here. it's just so many opportunities to have visual play, music, his own work here. There's a whole sequence where this guy's just chopping books up, and each one of the pages is great. And just so many different ways to use books to create different shapes and designs on the page. There's some, process studio shots embedded in here with an interview as well. It is all in French, so I have no idea what he's saying. This is another one that, even though the rest of the book you can enjoy pretty much just, as a silent book with some sound effects, I would really love to see it translated just to get this stuff translated. We're obviously dealing with someone who has a pretty singular mind for comics and a singular style. It would be nice to hear what they have to say. In the back of the book, there are some pieces that have dialogue in them. You can follow them more like a fight scene a little bit still. They're a lot of the same characters that YOKOYAMA YUICHI has built up. But there's the dialogue. I also, just based on the drawing style, think this is older work. So this is kind of cool to see the elements of Yuichi Yokoyama coming in where it is to a little bit more of a standard storytelling purpose at first. There's not so much abstraction and rhythm going on with like the sound effects on everything, it's not so visually sophisticated yet. So that's really cool to see some of the earlier work. And then a very, very strange like one-off spot here where it looks like he just clipped a chunk of like someone who uses a pen and ink and some splatters and stuff. Usually has this really clean style, and there's some real like hatch heavy splattered stuff, ink slingy stuff going on in this one section. So I don't know if he just cut and pasted that from somewhere. Those look like familiar marks. I feel like I've seen them before, but they're pretty standard type of marks too. Look like he cut that out of like Fist of the North Star or something. So I think that's really interesting that as he's using these tones, he's also using like clips of other people's drawings, or he's doing some totally different type of tools and techniques there than he's done it's only in that one spot. There was nowhere else that had that. So it's cool to see that early stuff where someone's trying something out and then they're like, nah, but then they try something else out and they're like, yeah, I'm going to keep that aspect. Like here you get the p and some of this rhythmic stuff with the lettering. Nowhere near as sophisticated as it gets, but you could see him introducing those ideas of the lettering as a visual component within the composition of his page. He's just hasn't nailed it yet. And I think that's all really cool to see. So really, really excited about this book, Combats, because I was able to read most of it. But in general, just really excited about Yuichi Yokoyama in general. And even though I've paid for these already, if they ever do come out in English, I would be happy to get translations. And you can see some of these are pretty thick books. The only thing that's a little strange is how they're bound. It's really nice because it allows you to flex the book and really have like true lay flat book. But on a bigger book like this, when you start closing it, it takes a little bit of work to make sure it's back in place. But other than that, these are impeccably produced books. Like the reproduction on these is beautiful, and all the books I have by Editions Métier are beautiful books. They've all held up well. They're really top of the line book collection and publishing company. So I recommend anything from them, but Yuichi Yokoyama is a very good artist. If you care at all about the future of the medium and what comics could be, definitely pick yourself up a copy of Plaza, get yourself a copy of Combats, and dive into the strange and fascinating world of Yuichi Yokoyama. Plaza by Yokoyama Yuichi. This is translated by Ryan Holmberg and is very large for a manga, so that's a really cool feature of this book, this standard manga size. And this is just a 200 some odd page representation of what Yokoyama Yuichi thinks of the Carnival parade, and he's just made this like relentlessly loud and rhythmic book that pushes all kinds of amazing boundaries of what comics and manga are, and we could not recommend this book more.